All right, welcome everybody. Mark, great to have you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Randy.
Absolutely. Nor, thanks for coming back from Jackson Hole to join us.
Good to be back.
Excellent. Well, everybody, welcome to Tech Sales Insights brought to you by Sales Community. If you want to learn more, sell more, go to salescommunity.com. This is episode number 69, and we are really psyched to have Mark Cosaglo here. He is VP of Sales from Outreach. So take a guess who the sponsor is. It happens to be Outreach. And Outreach is the sales engagement sponsor of Sales Community. Number one sales product in G2, and I know from a bunch of my CRO friends that either have it or are looking at getting it. Definitely is a fantastic platform that helps you sell more and be more efficient. So look forward to hearing more about Outreach. Our title today is Sales Engagement Best Practices from Reps to CROs. So I guess you can say Mark eats his own dog food for sure, but is definitely passionate about sales. We've actually only recently met since Outreach has been a sponsor of Sales Community, but I know he's very hands-on, very responsive, certainly has a fantastic team around him, sales-wise, marketing-wise for sure. And it's actually interesting within the technology world. He's been in Outreach going on 8 years, which I'm not sure, but I'm sure it's probably there's not too many, maybe 10 or 20% of the sales leaders that have been around that long. Mark, as you do probably know, I think the tenure of a VP of sales or CRO is I think around 16 or 17 months. So you're way above average. So probably some secrets there. And then also from a loyalty is probably the only word I can think of. In 24 years in the corporate world, you've actually only been in 4 companies, which likewise is probably an exception. So you're really you're bucking a lot of the trends. And just in case folks are interested, you did go to Penn State, and you also live in State College as well.
Yep.
So definitely look forward to this. So why don't we start off? Maybe tell us a little bit about your professional background.
Yeah, I've always been a seller. My first sales job when I was 7 years old, and I was at my uncle's house, and I collected all the toys of his older kids and put them in a wagon and went around the neighborhood trying to sell them to people so I could get the toys I wanted to play with.
Wow. So you're kind of an early eBay.
Hey, there you go. I like that idea. I'm going to start using that, Randy. I like that. I was the original eBay. And then, I got a great job in high school selling shoes at the mall. And I sat in the back of the stock room and watched videos for 14 hours. And what I learned was how to consultatively sell. I learned how to look at somebody's gait, their shoes, what they needed, and put them in the right shoe. And this is crazy for a mall shoe store sales guy, but I had 400 regular customers that would only buy their shoes from me. Because I'd helped them out so much. And then that continued through the great black art of credit card cold calling back in the day, where I learned how to get rejected 97 times an hour. That's not a lie. We had a machine in the back that would connect me to 100 people an hour, and 97 of them would say no or worse. And then I got into professional outside sales after that, and then leadership. So it's been sales from the get-go for me.
Wow, that's great. Love those stories. And so what about, how did you go from your sales director at School Specialty Planning and Student Development? How the heck did you go from there to Outreach?
Well, it's like one of those 1 in a trillion things, to be honest with you. I was managing a team of about anywhere from 12 to 25 people, depending on the time frame, up and down the Eastern Seacoast, an inside and an outside team, selling school curriculum and supplies and stuff like that. I honestly, I was bored, and I was doing really well, but I wasn't. It wasn't capturing all of my imagination and all of my attention. So I started blogging about sales and doing a little consulting on the side. And I met somebody in New York City that said, "Hey man, I know your blood brother. You really need to meet this guy." And his name was Manny Medina, and Manny is the CEO of Outreach. And he and I became friends. And he started asking me to coach him on sales, and I started coaching him. And at one point, I was like, "Why am I just not selling Outreach?" And he said, "We can't afford you." And I said, "I'll do 100% commission." He said, "We can afford that." And so for 6 to 8 months, I think it was I can't remember when I got my first paycheck. Let's call it 6 months, but I think it's 8. I worked on 100% commission. I sold $1 million worth of outreach. And then we raised our seed round, and Manny asked me to build out the sales team, and I've been doing that ever since.
Wow, fantastic. And then early on, you did some great work with Joshua House, including doing street ministry that you kind of equate to sales.
Yeah, listen, you got to find somebody's pain in sales in order to get them to see the light, right? It's basically the same thing. But yeah, my wife and I and a few of our friends formed Joshua House, and we were honored to serve our community for a long time and help people and especially youths that were disadvantaged and had a lot of things going against them. I think we've had some horrible stories in there. We have some great wins and some people that we've helped along the way too. But it was a great experience that I'm super appreciative for. It helped me learn a lot about people and to have like real sympathy or real empathy for people in areas of life that I had never had experience, but that I got to see the results of with these kids and their families.
Mark, what a great story. Randy and I both, faith is not only important to both of us, but there's an organization here in Atlanta called Seven Bridges, and they go and minister to homeless folks under 7 bridges in the Atlanta area. So kudos on that front. Can you talk a little about outreach? Tell us more about that. And I'm particularly intrigued by the idea of a sales, what do you call it? The sales gap, the sales execution gap. There you go.
Yeah. So I think there's have you guys read James Clear's Atomic Habits?
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome book. And one of the things that he talks about in that book is like, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And I think what's happening right now is the world of sales is changing a ton, and there's increased expectations on what growth rates and production and efficiency should be. And our systems right now in sales are not modernized to support that new environment that is created. And what we call that is the actual performance a rep can have or a sales organization can have plotted against what their potential could be if they were doing everything right and had the right tooling and the right coaching and all that. That difference between those two performance arcs we call the sales execution gap. And that's a level of efficiency that we believe is capturable by an organization if they do the right things. But unfortunately, most organizations are doing the wrong things. They're trying to hire more people, bring on more product, pump up the prices. And those are old school ways that are trying to solve a new school problem. And so we think that there's 3 main reasons why the problem exists, like inefficient prospecting. You just can't like cold call somebody 800 times anymore. That doesn't work. There's inconsistent deal management. Nobody's teaching managers how to actually run pipeline reviews. And so they're running them the way that their manager ran it with them, which was probably sucked. And then lastly is inaccurate forecasting leads to, hey, what do we actually need to do to hit the number? And if you can't really figure that out, then you can't influence where you're going to end up. You can only be a recipient of where you're going to end up. And so we believe that you can close that sales execution gap with a sales execution platform like Outreach that helps you efficiently use proven playbooks to create predictable prospecting results. We also believe that you can use it to consistently manage deals and have a level of visibility that gives unbelievable coaching. And lastly, is that adds up to a predictable way to forecast revenue so that you can understand where your business is going to end up. And I always ask people this: did y'all know that the Titanic didn't crash on the iceberg because they didn't see it? Most people think that they didn't see it. They saw it, but the rudder on the ship was too small to move it in time to avoid the coming disaster. And that's how I look at forecasting: is your forecasting stinks, which means your rudder's small. You can't change where you're going to end up. You're just going to get where you get.
Love it. So Seidel and I have talked several times. Sales has changed a great, and sales management and sales leadership has evolved a great deal since we were doing it in some ways old school. Would it be fair to say the sales execution platform, so as Randy mentioned, kind of eating some of your own cooking, has led to 5,000 plus global customers and all the success that Outreach has seen?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that we're one of the fastest growing startups that there's ever been. Since I've been here, we went from $0, and we passed $100 million well over 2 years ago. We're continuing to kind of cruise up that growth rate. We'll grow a lot over last year, over this year, even with growing a ton between the pandemic year and the post-pandemic year. So I think that we've really proven that if you tune your systems to overcome this sales execution gap, and you have a technology that helps you bridge it, that you have a chance to continue to grow and be predictable, even in really tough economic conditions.
Tell us a little about your funding, and maybe a little about the ideal customer profile. Who do you call on? Yep.
So I think we last did a Series E or F. I think we're close to $500 million in funding right now. We have been funded by the 3 major CRM companies in the world, and Salesforce, Microsoft, and SAP, all their venture arms, which are tasked with finding companies that improve the productivity of their user base. All 3 of those have evaluated all of our competitors and found us to be the leader, and therefore invested in us. So I think that we have a lot of funding, and 40% of our revenue we put back into R&D. So we are not a sit on your haunches and hope things go our way. We actually struggle with this. We think we continue to innovate so fast, we have to constantly redefine what we're doing, because we're getting deeper and deeper into the problem and understanding it. Our ideal customer profile is, listen, if you have customer-facing employees that need to have a better way to communicate with their people, a more routinized way of doing the work so that they can have a more efficient workflow that you want to be able to grab data off of in order to create operational methodologies that you want to put into a flywheel of continuous improvement, Outreach is built for you. I don't care if you're selling nails, software, mattresses, haircuts. If you're doing that kind of stuff and you want to get continually better, Outreach can probably help you.
That's fantastic. You mentioned the CRM folks had looked into you and your competitors. Who are the top people you come up against in your deals?
Yeah, so we have a competitor in Atlanta called SalesLoft that's super scrappy and passionate, and we really respect what they do. And then Salesforce and Microsoft both have now released competing products, semi-competitive products. They have a large product suite, so they can't quite put the attention on it as we have. But those are 2 or 3 of our people that we see in deals a lot.
Perfect.
Right. So we have for our title, Sales Engagement Best Practices from Reps to CROs. When you think about that, are you thinking about kind of, hey, generic, it's the same thing if you're a rep or it's a CRO, or do you kind of think about it being kind of different based on the function?
Yeah, so we think we help with 3 or 4 personas, depending on how you categorize them. We feel like the person doing the work, the rep, if you will, we really help that persona out. Like we can, again, create a workflow that creates predictable results, spins off tons of data that you can use to iterate and improve their performance. And, my dad taught me a long time ago, he led all of manufacturing at M&M Mars, which, makes Snickers and all that kind of stuff, and really big job. He said, if you make people's job easy, they'll work hard for you. And so I think that we do that. We make a rep's job easier, and that allows them to actually work harder. Then we have a manager persona, someone that needs to take the data, analyze it, and provide coaching and improvements, suggestions to the reps. And we have a lot of functionality and value built in there. And then we have some people break it out, some people put it together, this RevOps/CRO executive thing, which is these are the people that need to coordinate and make sure the plumbing all goes into the right place. And they're also responsible for delivering on the end targets that the company needs. And so we have a lot of things that we do to support those people to make sure that they're successful. So those are our 3 or 4 key personas that we provide value to regularly.
So besides, I'll say, Outreach as a platform around sales engagement, any other kind of best practices or things that you do or you've seen?
I think that one of our things that we've learned is as we've embedded ourselves in the workflow of reps, we have started to see other workflows that other personas use. So I would say, like, if you have a jobs to be done of prospecting and creating pipeline from day one, I think we've been the leader in helping people make that better and do a better job and be more efficient there. But there's also a job to be done of closing a deal. And we think that we've added recently a lot of functionality to improve the value that we deliver to people doing that. And then again, that other persona's jobs to be done is making sure that we hit the number and that we're planning for the future and creating the systems in place to create predictability and reliability and how we reach the number. I think that we've recently had an acquisition of a company called Canopy that allows us to put a bunch of value into that bucket. So I think that what we learned is when you master the workflow, you find that there's other workflows that are very integral to revenue creating organizations. And if you can meet the totality of all those workflows, you really can have a platform that can make a difference.
Yeah, that's great. So a really important question probably is, were you fully stocked at Halloween at your house?
Okay, so funny answer. I worked 2 summers at M&M's plants that my dad was the manager of.
Yeah.
And one of my jobs was there was a 300-foot long conveyor belt that was 10 feet wide that Snickers bite-sized candy bars would come down. So imagine tens of thousands of candy bars just looking down there. My job was to stand at the end of it with this little, the old person thing that they used to grab cans off the shelf.
Yeah.
I had one of those, and I'd stand there and I would pick any bar that was deformed or the chocolate wasn't right and put it into a barrel, and I could eat any of those that I wanted to eat. Well, it took me about 3 days before I didn't want to eat another candy bar all summer.
Oh my gosh, was that kind of like the remember? I don't know if you're old enough, but the I Love Lucy one where she is trying to pull them all off, and
that's exactly what it was like sometimes.
I love it. So for our audience, if you just joined us, you're listening to Mark Casaglow, VP of Sales for Outreach. Sounds like a fascinating, I love that sales execution platform. Mark, I got to tell you, I took notes when you were describing the ICP of customer-facing employees, better way to communicate, routine workflow, data, operational kind of methodology from it, flywheel of continuous improvement, which made me think you got to have a sales method that you've built, you deployed with your team. Can you talk about that? And equally valuable, how do you ensure, you mentioned it, forecast accuracy? Randy and I meet a lot of sales leaders that continues to be a challenge of, hey, I've got a deal, to making sure you stay on top of that and ensure that it comes to fruition. So talk a little about your sales method and let us better understand kind of how do you run the outreach sales team.
Yeah, so here it is right here. It's called Outreachology. And I have my enablement team print and laminate and send to every one of my people this card that explains and walks people through our mishmash of sales methodologies. We've combined 3 things. One is force management's command of the message, which we believe is what you need to say. We use Skip Miller's proactive selling, which is who and how should you talk about it. And then the lastly is we believe that there's a value conversation that happens about how outreach's value needs to be positioned. And we combine the 3 of those into how should you think about talking about outreach the right way with the right people, using the right words and communicating value that's really strong and aligned to our vision and what we do. And so I can go in a little more depth about that, but like that's what we've created. I have a great enablement partner named Whitney, and Whitney and I geek out on this stuff all the time. I actually have a revenue methodology manager, and her whole job is to make sure all the things that we do don't conflict with the baseline methodology that we've already put in place. Because a lot of times, you'll do something here on negotiation that actually conflicts with things that you've taught other people. She's there to make sure that stuff doesn't happen. And Malia is a huge, awesome partner for me.
How did you pick those 3? Why did those 3 resonate with you? How did you decide to, and we love that you build your own, but how did you pick those 3?
So command of the message and force management, we saw their presentation. We brought them in to help us because we were about 2 or 3 years in and we were still doing like just organic, what we thought was right. And they brought us a lot of structure that aligned our marketing and our sales orgs together. And just their methodology of, hey, you start with the negative consequences of what's happening now. There's a gap between that and a change that has to happen to get to the positive business outcomes of a future situation you want to do. So how do you bridge that gap? How do you do that change? Well, you go into and you find out like, all right, this is the way that we do it. This is how we do it better. So that just made sense. And it created a really nice structure that was easy to train and continue to be training on. Then Skip Miller, one of our sales leaders, came in and started talking about Skip's book. And we had a bunch of people read the book. And it just makes a lot of very vague and unclear communication about how you should be doing things very clear. You know, he has this concept of the line. It's the power line. You're either above it or you're below it. And so we talk a lot about ATL above the line and BTL below the line, and how do we get to the right place and how does that all work? And that was a construct that when we married with Command of the Message, helped us deliver a message, but now to the right people talking the right way. And then our value framework that we did is something that we just believe in. It's the visual proof. It's the data manifestation of the value that those other conversations create, that we need to be able to show people. This is what we'll be able to show you and talk to you about. But if you don't know how to explain it and how it all works, then it's a little bit, it can be a little bit overwhelming to people. So that's how we
love that. And we want to go to a question from Ryan. Quick, Ryan, what is the optimal number of touches needed to get a response?
There is not one. All right. So this is one of those. So I have this saying, and people ask questions like this, and Ryan, not being critical or anything, but like they're looking for a silver bullet. If I tune all of my sequences and all of my messaging and everything to 17 touches, I'm going to get an answer. Well, I'm going to ask y'all a question. So what does a silver bullet kill best?
What does a silver bullet kill the best?
David, it kills a werewolf.
Yeah.
And how many of us are out there trying to kill werewolves? There's plenty of regular monsters out there that we can kill that can just use a regular old bullet. And so like, let's not try to find the silver bullets. Let's just make a bunch of regular bullets and make sure we're aiming right. And so I think that there is no optimal number of touches. It just takes a lot of touches, a lot of consistency, and a lot of good messaging over time through multiple channels. And
Ryan, the other thing that we deeply believe in is those touches got to be value add, right? If I'm pestering the crap out of somebody, you're not giving me a reason to kind of engage. Whereas if you solve a problem, or if you help, or you help them get the answers they're looking for often, it's amazing how that moves the relationship along. Ryan, one other question of you is, Mark, what's your role in that sales methodology? When are you involved? How are you involved? How often are you involved? Talk a little about that for a second.
Yeah, I'm a sales nerd. I think about methodology. I would say that I was integral in the creation of it, and the team helped me to do that. I was integral in how we're going to enable it and roll it out. I spent a lot of time on the roadmap of what each stage is and what our give gets, who we're talking to, what our exit criteria is, all that kind of stuff. I was super involved in all that. And then my role now, though, is like I just had a conversation with the rep the other day, and we're trying to figure out how to accelerate a deal. My role now is to coach in a way that shows that I believe in this. And so I brought this out, and I was like, okay, Randy, have you done this and this in stage one? Well, I did this one, but not this one. I was like, well, then we need to go do this. That's what we need to do to accelerate the deal. Like, I know you think you're in stage 3, but you're actually in stage 1. Let's go crush that exit criteria in stage 1. And then let's look to see what we can start to set up in stage 2 to get that done. So my role now is to be consistent with what I say is important and actually coach using the methodologies that I say reps need to use.
Do you have that automated at all by chance? Because obviously your time to go through that, you'd think if that's something they would just kind of fill out for kind of deal reviews, so you can kind of take that information and help strategize at a higher level.
I found, and I've tried this and made this mistake, that if I put a bunch of fields in CRM that say, did you do this? Do you know what people, and I make them required, do you know what people do? They just say yes. And so it's no good data anyway. Or if I leave it as an open field they have to fill out, guess what they do? They type in random letters and numbers. And I can go chasing people about why they won't put in data into a CRM, but the reason is simple, is because we're not using it to make their lives better. So why should they put it in there? So what we did, we have a very routinized pipeline review process here that allows managers on a weekly basis to review what's important and align to this methodology and the data cleanliness expectations that I have.
Well, that's great. Back on the value messaging side of thing, did you use a Decision Link or any other kind of tool platform, or did you just kind of create your own?
No, we don't use any tooling for the conversation. I think I'm following you, right, Randy? We just train people on this is how you should have conversations that are effective and move deals forward.
Wow, that's great. Love it. Really, really fascinating. So for those, I'll say, CRO practitioners, kind of the way you created it, I'll say if they want to rinse and repeat to a certain degree, you need to, I know, very familiar with Force, so you need to bring them in. They kind of do the training education, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the Skip Miller aspect of things, is it a similar thing where they come in?
Yeah, Skip comes in and does a bunch of trainings about how to talk to people above the line and below the power line, which is, you don't think people would need to understand that or they'd really get it, but he does it in a way where you're like, whoa, this is so common sense, but you're blowing my mind right now.
Gotcha. And then for that third piece around the value messaging, that's something then you just created on your own?
Yeah, that's something that's specific to outreach. Like we have a way that we communicate ongoing value creation to our customers that our reps need to be able to explain how it works and the value to the customer.
Wow, that's great. And is that a proprietary kind of format thing, or is that something that you'd share?
Yeah, it's actually, we're about to release it next quarter in our product. We call it the sales execution funnel. It literally says, here's all the activity I've done, which has netted me this many responses. Of those responses, this is how many invites or meetings that we've booked because of that. And then how many opportunities we've created, and then how much revenue those opportunities do. And I can look at period to period, team to team, how we're performing in those areas. And then if one area looks bad, I can actually drill into 6 or 7 sub areas that give me a good idea. But this is a problem right now, Randy. You know it. Like, people have data, but how many conversations about data end in, well, the data is not right.
Right.
Let me actually got to explain the data, which makes the data useless. And the reason that exists is very simple, is the data is inconsistent. When you can make the data consistent, then you understand the story because it's consistently the same story. And so that's the challenge that we've undertaken, is we are going to say, this is how you should log data. This is what it should mean. This is how you should display it. And this is how you should do the analysis on it in order to figure out where you need to put resources to get better. And that sales execution funnel, which has been an internal tool that we've used with customers for a long time that we're now productizing because it's so valuable to our customers. That is our stamp on the world that just says, listen, you can do it your crazy way. You can be like, oh, if they call once in 15 minutes, it counts as one call. But if they call twice and quickly call back, that's still only one call. That's not 2 calls. All that kind of BS just makes all of your stuff inconsistent. Just like, let us make the definitions, and then you can run your business super simply then.
That's great. So I noticed on LinkedIn you've had some recent posts that, as we're saying in our prep, I would love to get your folks to put that in Sales Community, our newsletter. So I picked 3. So one of them is doing less is doing more. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So Outreach does really cool stuff. One of the cool things they did this year is this authors lounge where they'd have these great authors come in, and we had the author of Essentialism come in. And it's funny, I was kind of struggling with my team, and I didn't realize it until we had this authors lounge, and he talks about, and I've read the book about, what happens when you spread yourself thin versus spreading yourself deep. And so we started to think about that. And as we were preparing for this year, we realized our biggest mistake last year was people have a mental capacity. There's a cognitive load that they can stand. Think about it like eating. Like, you can only eat so much and then there's a bottleneck in your body where you just don't want to eat anymore.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, same things happens with learning and change. You can't just learn and change more and more and more and more, because you actually have to chew and digest and get the nutrients out of what you did and practice it and try it and whatever. And then eventually you become good at it. And so my enablement person and I created a matrix, and that matrix looks at what is the level of learning we want people to achieve. Do we just want awareness? Oh yeah, I heard about that new product. I can sort of talk about it, but I can't differentiate it. I probably can't have a deep technical conversation, but I'm aware of it. There's awareness, competency, and mastery. And each of those takes a different amount of time to get there. Mastery takes a full quarter of weekly reinforcement and multiple levels of enablement for you to have a chance to get at mastery. And then on the y-axis, we have cognitive load, which is low, medium, and heavy. If it's low, it means it's like, hey, if this is a tiny little change in somebody's behavior, the cognitive load is, they don't have to think about it a lot. It's not a lot. Or, hey, we're changing up how you're doing your base level messaging. Oh my God, that's a big thing for people to wrap their brain around. And so when you look at and you plot things in that 3x3 grid, you start to understand we can't do 7 things this quarter or we're going to do nothing. And so that's what I mean by do more with less. Is I would rather master 2 or 3 things a year than be aware of 20 things a year. But I guarantee you most companies are doing 20 things a year, and their people are getting aware at best of them.
Yep, totally well said. So as a reminder for those watching or listening, feel free to ask any questions. You go in and post them on LinkedIn, and we have Tucker behind the scenes always doing a great job. We are happy to pull those in and do our best to have Mark answer them. So you also have another funny one, which is your thoughts on spelling.
So I've had a couple of hot topics in my career. I was actually on city council for 10 years in my little city in my 20s. And when I tried to get fluoride taken out of the water, that was the biggest issue that the town had seen in a decade. I mean, we could get 3 people to come to a city council meeting. We had like 3,000 people come to that meeting. And so I'd say one of the other top 5 things I've done is to say spelling doesn't matter. And I was very purposeful in being provocative. I think spelling matters. I spell correctly, all right? What I was trying to get people to do was understand. They were saying, because somebody doesn't spell right, I'm not going to take a meeting with them and hear about the value that they can create for me. And they were equating somebody's ability to spell with their product's ability to create value. That is idiotic, all right? I don't care how you spell, Randy. If you can help me do $100 million more this year, I'm going to buy from you, and I'm going to thank you for every misspelled word and every email you ever send me. And it was really interesting to see in the comment section, if you look and read through that post, people cannot pull apart somebody's ability to spell with their ability to create value. And that is a disservice to themselves.
Yeah, I guess if I disagree, and my parents were college English professors, so they're probably rolling over right now. But I remember I had a friend, Jack Sebastian, who was a senior partner at Goldman Sachs, and he gave me an example of, there was some little typo, and he got reprimanded. And the opposite point of view would be is if you don't care, it's not really about the skill set of spelling, because we all make spelling mistakes, but it's your thoughtfulness and your caring enough with whoever it is that you're dealing with to go through and make sure that you're proofing it. So
what does it say about the person that at Goldman Sachs, that report was probably making people hundreds of millions of dollars, and that person decided to focus on the one tiny misspelled word? What does that say about that person? Yeah, I know what it's about them.
When we do these things, I always try and find things that I can kind of disagree with. So with you, it's been hard.
Yeah.
So I try and find some conflict. So, and then last one you brought up was the sub 4-minute belief creating pitch.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the year, I started to get some requests from some people that follow me on LinkedIn because they've heard some of the stuff that I do on discovery. And so I decided to go to a level of depth on how to do discovery that I had never seen before. And I did about 4 weeks of posts, so 20 to 25 posts on what the discovery call is supposed to be and how it's supposed to work. One part of this discovery call needs to be a give that you give your customer that helps them understand what you do and provides context. And it needs to be a sub 4-minute pitch. And I developed that because, I decided to post about that and include that because I had recently been on a couple of sales calls where people pitched me for 12 minutes in a row. And literally, I just was kind of like, I couldn't pay attention anymore. I didn't care. And I started to get confused because the pitch was so big and winding and sprawling that it didn't make any sense. And so I think having a tight, well-constructed, sub 4-minute pitch that contains 7 specific things that can completely elevate your ability to create the belief that you need in order to move the deal to the next step. And I'm happy to share that with those parts.
Yeah, he can't leave it there. I'm at the edge of my seat waiting to figure out what the 7 things are.
Well, I point somebody to LinkedIn. So I'll give you some examples of some of the 7 things. One of the 7 things is you need a hero. You need to be able to explain and say something specifically that does it. And think about it like storytelling. The pitch is a story. You got to have a problem. You got to have an enemy causing that problem. You have to have a hero that can defeat that enemy. You have to have proof that that enemy actually exists and it's not just you. And you have to have like a give, like what are you going to give them of that? What are you going to get back? And so those are some of the components of that pitch. And I think when you line those up and you're very consistent, I just did this with somebody. They called me on a Saturday and like, hey, I read your post. Like, can you help me with my pitch? And because my wife was gone and I was nerding out on sales stuff, I was like, yeah, sure. And in like 2 days, he had a pitch that like went from something that I was like, whatever, to like, I think I might need to introduce you to some people at my company because I think we might need this. And a great pitch will do that. And if you couple that with 25 minutes of awesome discovery, that's how you create a discovery call that will make somebody want to move forward with you in deal and asks you to move forward with them in deal rather than you having to dictate next steps.
Love it. Love it.
Great. We have a question from a LinkedIn user. Just so you know, sometimes people's names actually come up and sometimes they don't. And then we get these notes saying, oh, this is, so-and-so. So anyway, Mark, can you share how and when your team is communicating Outreach's value in your sales cycles when targeting CROs? So I'm sure the when is probably all the time, but it would be how.
Yeah, I think so. If you start with the first call, you have to give some context of value or people don't know what you're doing, what you're talking about, or you ask questions the entire time and it feels like an interrogation. Like I hate going to a discovery call and not getting any context on what's going on. And so I would say we first start communicating value with that sub 4-minute pitch at the end of the discovery call after we've done a lot of stuff to show them that we actually know about the problem and understand the problem and can do critical thinking on the fly that connects dots to say, this is what we think that you should be considering us for in terms of solving that problem. And then we'll show you later how to do that. But yeah, I think that communicating value is there's kind of 2 ways to do it. There's the explicit, I will talk to you about the value of outreach. And then there's the implicit, which everything I need to do has to be laced with a little bit of value or I risk turning the prospect and buyer off. And so, the answer is you do it always. And then when you decide you need to do it explicitly, you better be really good at doing it that and doing that concisely.
Great. Noor?
Yeah. So I'm fascinated, Mark, about prospects. As Randy may have mentioned, I've been a student of business relationships for 20 years. And a lot of what you're sharing resonates in that you've got to engage, you got to influence, you got to add value, you've got to create a market gravity or a pull, because pushing a rope seldom works. So can you share just some insights in how you take a prospect, prospect into strangers? You don't, you or your team doesn't know that CRO. You don't know me. You don't know much about me. We're not bros, right? So how do you do that? How do you build and nurture a relationship that makes me want to engage. It makes me want to influence my organization to embrace kind of your unique value.
Yeah, I think that people want to buy from people, but sellers very seldomly are themselves in the sales cycle. And I'll never forget that my first sales management job was with this school specialty company. I had a group of sellers in Bellingham, Washington, and I flew out to Bellingham to be with my inside sellers and to show them how to do work on the phone. And I actually sat with them for a day and did some recordings and all that. And we decided to call the way that they talked their used car salesman voice. And it was literally, I literally would say, all right, talk with me right now as a person. Now let's listen to that recording versus the recording of you on the phone. And it didn't sound like the same person. And so I said, watch me. And I had 8 people. I said, I will cold call your territory for an hour each. So I did 8 hours in a row cold calls, and they all sat in an office with me in the phone. And their number one takeaway was, Mark, you just sound like a regular old dude just calling somebody and talking to them about whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And I have a saying, like, you got to let your passion and your personality overcome your professionalism. People don't want to buy from professionals, right? They need professionals to show them value and to prove value. They need professionals to have legitimacy and stuff like that. But people want to buy from people with personality that are true to the people they are and are actually humans. And so I would say the best way to do is like slow down, like put yourself into a more social situation that you're more comfortable with, and like mentally prepare yourself to just have like an interesting conversation. I think that something that I hear a lot from our reps, because, well, not right now, but when I lived in Seattle, when I had more reps here in State College, I have people over to my house all the time. That's like my thing. Like, come over, have dinner with me and my family. Like, get to know us a little bit better. And I bring 3 or 4 of them over. One year I hosted Thanksgiving for all of the outreachers in Seattle who were transplants to Seattle. We had 40 or 50 people in our house for Thanksgiving, right? And but the reason I do that is because I need people to see that, like, how I am right now with y'all is exactly how I am in an executive session at Outreach, is exactly how I am with my daughters when we're out watching a movie, is exactly how I am with my wife when we're walking the dog. Like, that's just me. And you know what? It does turn a few people off. Some people aren't into Mark Costaglo. And you know what? Like, I put them with somebody else. They can talk to somebody else that they like better. That's cool with me. But I do think most people understand that I'm pretty authentic and I am who I say I am, and I act the way that I act because that's who I am. And I think once you get to that, people start to build relationships.
You both are gonna chuckle at this. I recently had a call scheduled with a CRO, and I'd just come from the dentist, and you know how they numb your face to do work, and I'm on Zoom from my phone from the car. I'd pulled over and I said, with apologies, I'm just coming from the dentist and my mouth is a little numb. So if I start drooling, don't be alarmed. And he later said, I appreciated that because you're real and you sounded real, and it wasn't a Hollywood square, perfectly packaged anything. And we're now working together. Just a great guy, but you're exactly right in that, Mark. I think, Randy and I've talked about this. I think most leaders, most people in general, have a BS radar. Yeah. So the minute they sense you're not being yourself, you're not authentic, you're not real, they disengage, right?
So what else are you not being real about?
Right? That's exactly. And I've always cringed when people say, "Let me be honest with you." So what? You lie to me the rest of the time? Like, where does that come from? On that note, I mean, Randy's in Naples. I just got back from Jackson Hole. You talked about your ministry and your daughters, and I've always believed work-life balance is a fallacy, because it just seems to be this constant struggle. When I'm on vacation, I'm thinking about work. When I'm at work, I'm thinking I really need a vacation. You actually talk about, I wrote about it called work-life blending in my last book. You also deeply believe in this kind of a different approach than balance. Talk about that for a second.
Yeah, so I call it work-life harmony. I realized early on I can't balance my life. I have 4 kids. And I have a very supportive, awesome partner as a wife, and my kids are super supportive and awesome too. I have a great relationship with every single one of them. And this is the deal, is like, sometimes my company needs me more, and sometimes my family needs me more. And I need to be able to tell the other one that, and then be cool with it, knowing that I'm always going to still give my best. And I think that if you can work with your work and work with your family to have the expectation of it's never going to be balanced, but I am going to make it harmonious and do what's the right thing to do, then I think things work out really good. Now, I'm lucky. I have a life partner and a wife that supports me in that and has helped me figure that out. I didn't figure that out by myself. And I also work for a really great company that doesn't give lip service to those sorts of things. They actually believe it. And so, I don't know if you could do that everywhere because some people just aren't understanding, but if you're not, you should get somewhere there is. There's plenty of places that are, and there's no reason that you need to work at a place that doesn't let you harmonize your life anymore. That's just, that's not 2021 or 2022, whatever year it is.
Love that. Yeah, we have a question from a familiar person that might. Yeah, Shannon Seidel's joining us. Hello, Shannon. Advance for advice for getting wider within current customer count. So I'm in. How do I land and expand those relationships?
First of all, you need to very succinctly define the personas that matter in a buying situation. We have an acronym at Outreach called Model T that David Rubenstein developed for us. And for us, we need to have marketing, sales operations, sales development, sales enablement, sales leadership, and technology and transformation. Those are the 6 personas that if we get buy-in from, we will get a deal done. And so if you don't know and haven't defined those personas, that's the first thing to do to get wider in the account is identify the targets to get wider. And then the second thing is, I think that the reason that you don't get wide is, I'm going to use some Skip Miller line languages. BTL people below the power line can only take you up in their line of power. An operations manager can only usually take you up to an operations VP. A demand gen director can only take you up to their CMO. But an above the line person, like a CRO, can take you over to marketing or can take you over to operations. So the first thing that you need to, or the second thing that you need to do is understand that where are you at in the power structure? And if you aren't above the power line, you can't get wider because that person can only take you up. So use that great sales manager that's a huge coach to build a sales leadership champion above the line in the CRO, and then use that relationship to get yourself wider. Now, super idyllic, right? Oh yeah, just talk to the manager. They'll introduce you to the CRO, and the CRO will introduce you to everybody. Like that doesn't really happen that way, but theoretically, that's how it has to work in order for you to do it. The other thing is just treat every persona like it's its own deal. Like prospect them, go after them. It doesn't matter if you're in the deal and have a live opportunity with one persona. Keep your SDR and you prospecting, keep marketing aimed at the other personas you need to get and cold call them into existence. And then once you have an existence, what you need to do is you know, start to say, hey, I've been meeting with marketing and ops in sales development. I'm going to write an email to the executives in each of those to let everybody know that I've been talking to everybody else and all the work that we're doing in the movement forward. And then that'll kind of help you move up the power line to, again, get to that place where you can go wide.
Again, I want to make sure I get my money's worth. Model T was marketing, ops, sales development. What were the other ones?
Sales enablement.
Technology and transformation.
Yep. Sales leadership. Yep. That's ours. Like if you're selling security software, you're going to have something totally different. That's what it is if you're selling into sales and marketing like we do.
There you go.
Fantastic.
So Shannon, maybe for your company, you can go back and say, okay, what are those personas and come up with some cool acronym.
Yeah.
Love it.
Over acronyms. Some beverage. You've really done something when you have an acronym.
Love it. Did you guys have an SKO in person or virtual, or talk a little about your SKO?
We had we call it Growth Summit. It is a go-to-market function that we usually couple with our company all hands at the beginning of the year. So we do 2 days of go-to-market stuff that our CRO runs. Growth Summit was virtual, as was our company all hands to kick off the year. But then in the 2 or 3 weeks after that, my individual segment VPs ran in-person smaller events to supplement and create some connection that we've been craving.
That's fantastic. So I think we got a follow-up question from Shannon. As a VP, what communication would you want to receive from a current vendor? Bullet highlighting success, joining cadence calls, only joining business reviews. What's your lens on that?
So from a current, so it's funny. I think it's a really, really great question. I think that what I want to know is, do you understand the initiatives that I currently have chips on the table for? So except for in the planning period, the 2 or 3 months before the beginning of the new fiscal year, I have made my bets. And I have said, these are the things that I'm going to invest in, that I'm going to focus on, and I'm going to drive execution around, because I believe that these bets pay off with large impact on our results. And anything that you bring me outside of those bets is noise to me, and I will push it off and not pay attention. But if you said to me, hey, I know you have bet A on this initiative, Mark, and I believe that with these resources, we could help you make that initiative less risky and more likely to pay off, I'm going to listen. Because my CRO and I just talked about this, is we would much rather push more chips on the table that we've already bet on than take our chips off that table and put them somewhere else. And honestly, just think about this for a second. A current vendor brings me some problem that I'm currently not on my initiative list, blows me away with a demo. I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome. I go to my CRO and I'm like, Anna, I'm going to completely change how we're going to do X. And because of this great demo I had, guess how long? That's why there's 17 months annual tenure for sales leaders. Stupid stuff like that. I've made my bets. Help me make my bets less risky.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You're trying to change, behaviors and reshuffle priorities. And you're right. It becomes noise and you're much more likely to ignore it. Randy, over to you.
Great. Thanks. So you've been on the road, I think London last week, New York City 2 weeks ago. And I saw from one of your posts in London talking about diversity, equality, inclusion. If it's okay, I'll quote, diversity is being invited to the dance. Equality is being asked to dance while you are there. Inclusion is being able to dance like nobody's watching. I thought those were really, really well said.
Well, I stole that from Kiara Flannery, who is one of our AEs in our London office. And we, diversity isn't just a lip service thing at Outreach. We had the day before International Women's Day on our weekly all hands in EMEA that's run by a few of our leaders over there. They had a panel of women that talked about being a woman in the workplace, what it's like, how it feels. And there was a bunch of awesome, provocative questions that were asked that those 4 ladies up there did an unbelievable job of saying, this is what it's like, and helping the audience to understand that, and people like me. And I walked away from that quote having a better and deeper understanding of what diversity, inclusion, and equality is than I'd ever had before. I just thought it was a great quote. So I asked her if I could steal it. Actually, I didn't ask. I just stole it and referenced her. So, but yeah, awesome quote, awesome concept.
That's good. Any other kind of, I usually use the word diversity, but now I usually say diversity best practices, but I guess I'll have to say change it to inclusion.
Yeah. Listen, I think this is a super challenging thing to do. So let's say that I'm a sales leader that values diversity. I open up a rec and I get 80 resumes. 76 of them are male and 4 of them are female. What are the chances that the 4 female are going to be better than all 76 of the males? It's probably not very high. Possible, but not high. And that creates a real problem if you want to be diverse. You have to put resources and intentionality and a unwavering, hey, we're not going to give here on diversity. And I'm really lucky that my CRO has that same mentality. And I'm lucky that my CEO has that same mentality. And so it's not hard for us to hold the line and hold out for a diverse candidate that meets our criteria, rather than settling for the immediacy and urgency of filling a need just because there's somebody there that can do it. And so you have to be focused and super intentional. And then on the back end, once they're in your org, you have to support them. If they're the only woman sales leader, they're not going to feel included. It doesn't matter how much you try. There needs to be multiple people there that are like them. We're all like that. And so hats off to our CRO. She realized that this was an issue in my org. So she created a program called Rise, where we have identified 6 or 7 of our young female leaders that want to become executives and they do monthly sessions on how do you present yourself? How do you think about yourself? Really cool stuff, like find one business problem that you want to solve, and then our CRO supports them in resourcing to solve that business problem, to show them, you know what, like whatever I want to go get, I can go get if I just put my mind to it and make it happen. And so that's really cool stuff that we're doing here.
Great. Do you let's follow on here. Do you work with any of the universities that have sales programs?
So oddly enough, my youngest daughter is a sales major at Bloomsburg University, which has the 9th best sales program in the country. She was going to go to University of Taos. I don't know if you know Dr. Howard Dover. I think he runs the best sales program in the country, but because of COVID, that we weren't able to do that. But and then we have an HBCU arm that kind of like does recruiting for our SDR org. I haven't heard an update on how we're doing that recently, but I know we did that for a while, and we have been to a few college campuses to do recruiting directly from sales colleges.
Yeah, so I think there's only, you identified the problem. You had 4 out of 80, but the idea is, okay, how do you kind of get that 4 to 40, right? So I think going back in the college ranks and university and saying this is a good profession, something that you should do, can do, make it be, all inclusive is something that can be a huge value.
I'll tell you something really cool. I just met this lady named Eva Helen. I did a podcast called The Revenue Innovators with our evangelist. Her name's Mary Shea. She's a former chief analyst at Forrester. And Eva's wrote a book called Women in Tech, a book for the guys. And in it, she creates 7 archetypes of what a advocate or an ally all the way to a misogynist looks like and what the characteristics are. And I think that understanding and having an idea of kind of like how you work, because one thing that she said to me was at the beginning levels, Randy, it's almost 50-50. That's not the problem. Hiring more women is not the problem. The problem is that each level of promotion, it becomes more and more or less and less diverse. It becomes more and more male. So that by the end, you have this 85-15 male-female ratio in the executive thing. The issue isn't the hiring. The issue is how do we get women to advance through their career at the same rate as men, which right now does not happen.
Yep, totally well said. We actually have Mary coming up sometime down the road here on
Awesome.
Tech Sales Insights. So we're just about at the end here. Nora, let you ask final question.
I love it. So I want to go to Tim. Tim's got a great one. Who's the best leader you've been around and why? You've got a lot of wisdom. They can't all come from, I love the author lounge, by the way, but they can't all come from books. Mark, who's really had an impact on you as a leader that's really resonated with you and kind of how you think and how you lead?
Yeah, so I worked for a guy named Matt Millen. And Matt ran all sales for T-Mobile, and he also ran sales for Tony Robbins for 9 years. So you can imagine being in that world. He picked up a lot about positive mindset, the energy you bring, how people feel about what you're saying, how you want them to think about what you're doing, how your mannerisms and the things that you subconsciously communicate affect how people perceive you. And I think I had a lot of things that I thought about, but I couldn't quite mold into a concept and then name so that I could figure out how I wanted to do it, measure it, observe myself in it and get better. And I'd say Matt was probably the most influential leader I've had in helping me see like these kind of soft skills of leadership could balance out my hard skills of running an awesome spreadsheet, analyzing data, forming an operational fix to something, executing on it. And so I think he kind of gave me a lot of form to some of the things I was feeling and believing and experimenting with that was super valuable. So I would say Matt Millen has probably been the most influential person in my career as a leader.
That's a great summary.
Awesome. Great. So time flies when you're having fun. So Mark, thank you so much. For those that are customers of Outreach, fantastic. For those that are not, please go check them out. We will be posting and reposting this on all the different social mediums, YouTube, LinkedIn, all the other ones. So Tucker, thanks for doing that. Nora, as always, always appreciate you. And next week we have episode number 70 with Mike Troiano. He's kind of longtime CMO, currently a VC with G20 Ventures, advisor to Drift. He's on several boards, and that's going to be sponsored by Taos. So Mark, fantastic. Well done. Really appreciate it. And look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thanks, y'all.